Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Roofing Contractors and the Walls and Ceilings Legal Insights podcast. I'm roofing contractor editor in chief Art Eisner, and I'm glad as always to be joined by Trent Cotney, partner with Adams and Reese. Trent, great to see you as always. How are you today?
Good to see you, man. I'm looking forward to today's conversation.
Well, great. I know it's always great to have you to talk us through some of the big issues happening in the industry. I did want to capitalize a little bit on the timing. Now we're heading, or we're now officially into spring. Tell me a little bit about what you're hearing about some of the early extreme weather incidents roofers have been dealing with, and what's the mood out there?
Yeah, there's already been a few hailstorms. Obviously, as we get into April, you start getting into tornado season, and as we both were kind of discussing before we got on, the forecast for hurricanes this year looks pretty robust. So we had a very calm year last year. The odds are not in our favor this year, which could be good for roofing, or depending on where you're at. So I think it's going to be a strong storm year, and I think we'll rebound from kind of what we saw in 2025.
What are some, key things that contractors should worry about heading into storm season, or at least to be prepared for, especially when weather is so unpredictable?
Yeah, there's a lot of things. I think one thing is making sure that you've got enough materials and supplies on hand. It's important to stock up on shingles, fasteners, plywood, the things that you're going to need in order to repair roofs. But it's also important to stock up on the blue roof material, tarps, those types of things, because typically you can lead with that and then convert that into a roof replacement later. So getting that is incredibly important. Obviously, you want to make sure your contracts are tight, both from the re-roof standpoint, if you're doing storm and insurance work, as well as a temp repair or blue roof type contract. On the walls and ceiling side, when you have restoration issues that involve the building envelope, same thing applies. Typically, we will see missile debris or other things cause damage to the exterior that will need some temp repairs. Making sure that you understand warranties and navigating that is important, and obviously you kind of shore up your contract in that regard as well. We see a lot of interior damage as a result of water intrusion, so drywallers are going to be very busy during storm season. That's always the case. And making sure that you're doing your best to document existing conditions, not cover up mold, or make sure that it's a dry workplace. All those types of things are important and can mitigate risk in the event that there's claims later down the road.
Right. And especially now with the way that insurance is, it seems like the companies are kind of moving the goalposts on
Right.
contractors. That documentation is key. You're talking not just about physical paperwork, videos, photos, all of that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the state laws for insurance differ subtly. Most of, I'd say 90% of them are the same, with the exception of Florida, which happens to be a sort of its own beast. But there's two constants if you're doing storm and restoration work, regardless of what you're doing. And that is, there's no such thing as free work. So the homeowner always has to pay the deductible, or the commercial owner. I like to have a statement in my contract that says that customers' payment of the deductible is an absolute unconditional obligation. So that you've got that there. The other thing is that most states regulate whether or not you are a public adjuster. Typically, a contractor cannot act as a public adjuster, meaning that they can assist a customer with scope as it relates to communicating with their insurance, but they cannot represent the customer, and argue and negotiate pricing, or interpret policy provisions, things of that nature. If you do that, then you run the risk of being an unlicensed public adjuster, and there is a significant amount of regulation in most states that prohibit that.
Right. So more important than ever to stay in your lane.
Yep,
If
keep
you're
those guardrails up.
Gotcha. Well, you touched on it earlier. We did see the early hurricane season forecast from the Weather Service. National Weather Service really does sound more than a dozen named storms. Of course, they had a similar prediction last year, but that didn't turn out to be the case. How have how have you told contractors, over the years, to handle these type of forecasts, how to approach them?
Yeah, you kind of take it with a grain of salt. I mean, every year it's doomsday is predicted, and then sometimes it happens, and sometimes it doesn't. I think you prepare for storm season. You recognize that it's more than likely you're going to have some hurricanes and major storms that kind of come through. But you certainly can't put all your eggs in that basket. And that's why I like to see a mix of both retail and insurance and storm work because, retail keeps the lights on. I think you can do retail or maintenance and service work and help, offset some of that insurance loss in the event that big storms don't come through.
Hmm. And part of the storm work, it is also more difficult and more dangerous for the contractors themselves. We had a few incidents last year, lightning strikes, other type of weather-related fatalities. What's your message to contractors out there about those liability concerns when weather gets bad?
Yeah, safety is always paramount. Anytime you're entering, especially if you're entering a area that's been struck by a storm, there's a lot of debris, and there's a lot of sharp points and stuff sticking out of the ground and all kinds of stuff that you wouldn't have on a normal work site. So it's important that you're training your crew on identification, on usage of proper PPE, on recognizing that you could be working, in a work area or work zone that isn't stable, right? So it's important to take those precautions in advance. And obviously, what you want to do is, before you start a job, especially a larger job, in a storm-based area, you want to make sure that you're having job site discussions, review the equipment, review the safety protocols, and have job site specific safety plans if you need them.
And specific to those areas when lightning is an issue,
Mhm.
uh, you've got to move. There really isn't, any leeway when
Yeah,
it comes to something that serious.
we had two what they call blue sky fatalities last year, where there wasn't, you look over your head, there's no clouds, but storm off in the distance, right? So there are a variety. I used to carry the technology is a lot better now, but it was a standalone clip-on lightning detector, and I used to carry that on me when I was on project sites. The apps will have it now, and there's a lot of different ways that you can do that, but you want to have that on there. You don't want to be messing around with it. I mean, obviously, there are situations where you got, a wall that's open or an open roof or something, and you've got to pick your poison. But I always err on the side of making sure that your employees and your crew and your other people that are out there that are working are safe. That's the most important thing. You can always deal with the aftermath if for some reason there's some water intrusion or something else.
Okay, great reminder there. This isn't particularly related to storms, but we have already seen that record heat dome out west. Heat is
Mhm.
always an issue for contractors working in the outdoors. As far as the OSHA heat regulations are concerned, there's been a lot of talk about that over the last couple of years. What's new on the legislative front? Is that still a concern for contractors?
Yeah, on the federal level, there's roughly 24 states that are federal OSHA, and then the remainder of the states have their own state plans, which are modeled after the federal guidelines. They could be more restrictive, just not less. And on the federal standpoint, there is a specific OSHA heat and injury rule that has been undergoing rulemaking for some time now. Still in that process, it remains to be seen to what extent, the administration will move forward with it ultimately. So don't know where that is, but regardless of whether you're federal or state, many state plans have their own heat and injury illness rules, such as California, right? But regardless, you as an employer have a general duty to keep your employees safe from recognized hazards. Heat is a recognized hazard. So what do you need? You need to make sure that you're taking hydration breaks. You've got water and electrolytes on a job site. We had an individual that fell off a ladder because he cramped up, right? And one of the questions that OSHA asked was, did you offer electrolytes? what happened here, right? Signs of impairment and emergency protocol. So if you see someone that is suffering from heat exhaustion or heat illness, what have you done to prepare for that? What have you done to train your crew? Are you taking the appropriate breaks? Are you documenting all that? Remember, this wouldn't be a podcast with Yard if I didn't say the party with the best paper wins the day. So you've got to make sure that you've got proper documentation to show that you're engaging in those breaks, that training, and that you've got that emergency response protocol.
Okay, got it. And it's hard to apply this in all areas across the country that you work in. But is there anything else that comes to mind that should be on contractors' radar this year as they approach that storm season?
I think it's important to gameplay. I think as you look out, you want to anticipate a robust storm season, regardless of whether you're in a hail-prone area, wildfires out west, or hurricanes east. You want to make sure that you've thought about everything from mobilization to communication post-storm to inventory to where you're going to store, how you'll mobilize and demobilize. You want to plan all this out in advance, because what it's going to do is basically show you some of the potential weaknesses. I was talking to one contractor that was utilizing an AI tool to help assist with this and point out things that they may not have thought about before. So now's the time to do it. We're literally a few weeks away from peak tornado season coming up. And then followed by that, we're right into, hurricane season. So take the time to make sure that you've thought about everything and that you're planning in advance.
All right, great information as always, Trent. Where can contractors find out more?
Sure, they can email me at trent.cotney@arlaw.com or anywhere social at Trent Cotney.
Okay, and before you head there, please be sure to sign up for our free e-magazine and our free e-newsletters right here on roofingcontractor.com. And for our walls and ceilings audience, please do the same on wconline.com. Stay safe, and we will see you guys next time. Thanks, Trent.
Thank you.